My methods going into this project were mainly introspective, writing down how my experience of love shaped me and giving way to all the emotions I felt. I often cried during these written monologues of my life, but it was therapeutic. It gave me a sense of direction within my practice and a lot of motivation, as I felt right to summarise my own work in the context of thoughts and feelings accompanied by photos from the early days of our relationship. It also helped to look at similar experiences, such as Sophie Cale's work, Take Care of Yourself. Her work spoke volumes to me. The fact that someone you once loved could be so impersonal with their words. Like her, I didn't want to sit idly by and let such a milestone in my life pass as just another day. I wanted to share my experience with others. Perhaps not in the way that she did by circulating the email her ex sent to her to other women to interpret. Her use of various medias was unique, but I knew I wanted simplicity within my practice. Sharing details that weren't of my own thoughts would stray them the path I wanted to lead. Throughout my practice, I often struggled to identify what makes me a photographer. I've experimented with ideas such as fashion, contemporary works and editorial photography. However, I felt that my strengths lie within fine art photography. From past works that I've created, it always seems to be the ones that express my own truths that invoke strong emotion. For me, this was one of those occasions. I felt like I was sitting in a therapist's office, combing over every detail of mine and my ex's relationship. It felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, and I was unburdened by the past. When I finalised my pieces, I felt a great sense of pride within myself. Something as traumatic as heartbreak could often cause a relapse, but for me it was different. I was glad to be done, glad to have finally reached a place where I'm open and ready for love again. In addition to the Sophie Cale research, I looked into a select few other artists, including Dwayne Michaels and Billy Howard. They were a driving force in understanding how to accompany photographs with text. I learned that a photograph can carry significance, but my own thoughts and feelings directing the viewer's perception of the imagery was much more profound to me. Such as in Howard's Epitaphs of the Living. His work revolved heavily around the AIDS epidemic in the early 80s and 90s. Hearing from the victims' families and the victims themselves was an eye-opener for me. Especially as a gay man such as myself, it felt as though I could be one of those photos one day. Either me or my family describing the life I was to lead. Movement like that can solely be found in pictures, yes, but hearing from the men who suffered at the hands of AIDS felt so much more impactful than just seeing them. Hence why the use of text was important for me in this project. When accumulating my research, I often found myself worried how I would lay the photos out. As I wanted to do these photos justice, I wanted them to be something I can be proud of, and when deciding upon the layout, I was out in Archway, funnily enough, and I stumbled upon this frame shop, and there was this lady inside. She helped me understand the composition of my work, giving tips on how I could frame the photographs to fully encapsulate the images in all their glory. She introduced me to some frame wood types, and I found a rich dark Jacobean wood stain that felt so fitting to the imagery. Ultimately, if and when I decide to frame them, this could be my go-to. 2-inch thick frames with detailing like architrave, to give that sense of warmth only found within certain types of love. The darkness of the stain invokes the feeling of how tainted the love was towards the end and encompasses most of my memories from that time. In addition to this, she threw some good ideas out there regarding the text. She suggested embossing it into the photos so that the words and images were one. I liked that idea initially, but it didn't feel right. It felt as though I was hiding my words within the photos, and I wanted the text to be a separate entity from the images to give the reader clarity that this is the place that reminded me of them. I felt that hiding the text would take away from the narrative of the images, and so when I arrived home that night, I started experimenting. Instead of embossing onto the images, like the lady suggested, I tried writing onto them in black and white paint markers, thinking that these would be more visible and add texture. However, it just didn't feel right. I also tried writing on the glass, but it was still a no. I spent hours trying to find the right feel within the text and the images, trying to make them as one, but ultimately I was dissatisfied with the outcomes of my experimenting. In the end, I felt they should be separate. This led me to placing them an inch apart to see how they fared when not combined. And to me, it felt right. It felt the narrative of the text was clear and the imagery invoked the places to the viewer, so I ran with this composition. I made some tweaks to the photos, aiming for a natural tone that conveyed the healing while acknowledging that those memories will always be a part of me. I felt that black and white was too cliché, so I experimented with the tones from green to blue, even pink at some point. However, I felt that the healing brings a warmth over you, so I opted for a more sepia tone. They felt warm, with a tinge of black and white in some areas when looking at them. You don't initially perceive the warmth until you get closer, which is where the text comes in. This was one of those happy accidents that made it work. I remember printing out different sizes of text, figuring out what I wanted and how I wanted to say it in text form. Initially, I found a perfect size, but couldn't remember the exact dimensions. Luckily, I had an example I printed out beforehand. I measured the width and height of the text, and what came out was the definition of perfect. It felt dainty and subtle, making the whole narrative of the work bond together. This meant that the viewers would have to get close to the photos to read it, invoking feelings of fragility and significance to how I felt towards the end.